Welcome back to the Shepherd's Pie, a slice of faith for our messy lives. I'm Tony Kolenc, a speaker, law professor at Ave Maria School of Law in Naples, Florida, and I'm also the author of inspirational fiction for teens and adults. As we head through Lent towards the sacrament season, I'd like to highlight one of my books for middle graders called Penny and the Stolen Chalice. Great for First Communion, maybe up until about 5th or 6th grade, and put out by our Sunday Visitor kids. It's a great mystery book that hits on some Eucharistic themes also, which is appropriate. So check that out. But today I will be speaking with Stephanie Lansom about parents letting go of their hold on their adult children. My guest today is author Stephanie Lansom, who writes historical fiction for women about women. Stephanie is the author of the Carol Award-winning novel Codename Edelweiss, which I had her on the show talking about a while ago, which is an excellent novel. But her newest release is called The Fault Between Us. It's set in 1959 Yellowstone on the eve of a cataclysmic earthquake. So she makes her home in Wisconsin with her husband, 3 cats, and a dog. And she also has some adult children, which will factor into our discussion today. So, Stephanie, welcome back to the Shepherd's Pie.
I'm glad to be here, Tony. Thanks for having me.
So, we've talked to you before, but what you've been doing in the time since we last spoke?
Well, I'm a Catholic wife and mother. As you said, I have 4 adult children, kind of an empty nester now, which is new for us. I've written 6 novels. Historical fiction. My first 3 were biblical fiction. So I just love history. I love writing inspirational fiction that has a message to people that might bring them closer to God.
Okay, so The Fault Between Us, based on actual historical events, and maybe kind of give us a little bit of what was going on at that time and why you decided to pick that particular history.
This is a fun one because it's kind of been in the back of my mind for a long time. My dad, my whole family, we grew up in the national park system. My dad works for the national parks, and he and my mom started out in Yellowstone. That's where they met. That's where they fell in love. We have lots of family stories about just living in the remote areas of Yellowstone where they were. And that's always been kind of in the back of my mind as one of my favorite places to write about, and I wanted to do it. And then I was talking to somebody about the Hebgen Lake earthquake, which I grew up hearing about my whole life. I just assumed that everybody knew about this massive earthquake that hit Yellowstone in 1959. And no one did. No one had ever heard of it. And I thought that would be a great setting and something fun to write about, because who doesn't like a real disaster, like disaster movies, disaster books, where people are fighting against the elements and trying to save each other. And it's really an amazing story about what happened during this earthquake. And also I got to interview my mom and dad, not my dad because he's passed away, but I remember all his stories about it. But my mom was there during the earthquake, and her 2 sisters actually were visiting from Minnesota where they lived, and they were there for the earthquake also. So I got to call them, and they're all in their 80s and 90s, but they have great, very sharp memories about what happened that night in August in 1959. So that made the book both like really fun to write, but also really hard to write because it's hard to know like what I didn't want to leave anything out.
Isn't that also supposed to be the site of like a super volcano or something? And that one day when it blows up, we're all going to die. What's going on with that? And is that in any way related to the earthquake in 1959?
Well, the caldera is what you're talking about. So the whole, I think it's 1 million acres that Yellowstone is sitting is on top of this massive caldera. It's so close to the surface, and that is why there's all of these geothermal anomalies that people go to see. I would hope that anyone who read The Fault Between Us would put it down and say, I want to go to Yellowstone, because at least in the United States, there's nothing like it. So yeah, it's a very active volcanic area, but the chances that that caldera is going to blow are minuscule. We don't have to worry too much about it. But if it did, you're right. Like life on Earth would be different. Like the United States would be wiped out. Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Wow. All right. Bringing us back to then your characters, because you mentioned The Fault Between Us isn't just about earthquakes, it's actually about people. So maybe give us a little
Right.
background on the characters and are any of them inspired by real life people?
Oh, yeah, they really are. And I think that's why it made it so hard to write this one because normally you can make up characters and do whatever you want to them. The two main characters, Claire and Red, are based on my parents, although I make it very clear to my family and especially my mom that they're not biographical. They are just based upon them. My mom did ask me to name the hero of the book Red because that's my dad's name. That's what he went by all of his life. So it was really so I did do that, and I think it made it harder. I should have just like given him a name like Bob and then changed it at the end because thinking of him as the character would slowed me down a lot, and I miss him, so it made it harder. But so Red and Claire are the main characters. Her sisters are also big parts of the story. They come out to see her from Minnesota, her sister Bridget and Franny, and they're based on my mom's sisters also. They're just super fun to interview and hear about their experiences, especially Franny. So it was really fun to base those characters on my aunts and my mom and dad. And then these sisters have a really like fraught relationship with their dad. In the book, I'm going to say not my mom's family. In the book, their dad is very attached to them and he raised them. The mother is gone. She left when they were young. And it's a very tight-knit family. And then suddenly Claire decides she's going to go to Yellowstone to work in the summer, which was very typical in the 50s that teenagers and young adults would take summer jobs in Yellowstone. And then she meets Red and suddenly just marries this cowboy that nobody knows and moves out to Yellowstone and leaves her family. And that leaves a big hole in that family unit that doesn't really heal. Their dad is very broken up about it. He has a really hard time letting go of Claire and his other daughters. And that leads to some of the issues that the sisters have to resolve and face over the course of the story.
Wow, okay. And you said that you personally are the mother of four adult children. I'm the father of five adult children, and so I suppose as you start getting into that theme in your book, there's some real life kind of inspiration you can draw as a parent. But kind of maybe set up for us, what do you see as the issue, and especially as it percolates in your book, with parents and their adult children?
Well, I just think, and I mean, I can only speak from my own experience and that of, friends that I've spoken to who are kind of my age and that are also running into some of these issues. I just think it's a tough transition for some people, especially, I don't want to sound, sexist or whatever, but especially moms who've stayed home and really made their whole life about their kids, which there's nothing wrong with that. But then as they grow up, and get older and leave and are adults, start making their own decisions, it's sometimes just really hard to let them go, let that natural process happen where they separate from you. And I was going through that during this time, which I didn't really like plan that or anything, but as a writer, your life always informs a lot of what happens in your stories. I was dealing with that myself, and I could really see that happening within the story with Claire's dad and his daughters, and how that was, if you don't recognize it and make an effort to cut those ties to a certain extent, the ties that shouldn't be there anymore. And that can have some real conflict in your family. And like personally, you can be very sad and just have a hard time managing this new life that you've been given and that God's given you this new like time of your life to maybe do other things that God has ready for you. And instead you're holding on to that old life. Like, I don't want to let it go. That's just not healthy. And it's not probably what God wants for us.
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about it being maybe more for women. My wife and I think it's role reversed. She seems very able to handle change and the kids growing up and getting out and doing their own lives and us moving into a new phase. And she keeps saying, I'm the one that doesn't want to change anything. So I can relate to the moms out there who are saying those things. And of course, when we have multiple children, I mean, I feel like when like my eldest or the second eldest start growing up. You still have others at home, so maybe it's not felt as keenly as when the last one leaves. Is there a difference between your first one and your last one leaving?
I think maybe like personally, it was more of a yes, it was hard when our last one left, but not just because we missed her, but suddenly it occurs to you like the house is really quiet. This is new. This is like a new life. Like, yes, we still spend time with the kids and do stuff with them, and we have them over and, we do birthdays and Christmas and all that stuff, which is super fun. But those things almost make it more, it kind of clarifies like what the rest of life is. Like these are just events and our lives are without our kids. So I don't know if it was just when our youngest left. I think that just made it very obvious. It was like, oh, wait, I miss all of them. Like they're all gone. That's interesting that you feel it more keenly because that is absolutely valid. I think it's just as a personality thing. And maybe it isn't a female male thing. It's just like how you view the next step or maybe ability to change. I've been told maybe that I'm not great about change. And I like things to remain the same. It's also an opportunity to have do something new to really strengthen your marriage. Like if you're lucky enough to still have your spouse with you and you're an empty nester, like that's awesome. And that's a gift from God that you should be very grateful for. And I remind myself that a lot.
It's definitely difficult. And I wonder, and I don't know if this happens in your novel or not, but I know parents of adult children, and their adult children have grown up and made really great life choices, things the parents love. And maybe they're, especially like when it comes to faith, which is obviously a big thing,
Mhm.
probably for
Mhm.
this audience, kids who follow in the faith. I go to Ave Maria School of Law here in Naples. There's a lot of really faithful Catholic students here. And I think of all their parents who are probably so proud that their kids followed in their faith footsteps and all that kind of stuff. Even when that happens, I'm assuming there's a hard time letting go on decisions that your kids make. But I'm wondering, for me, my experience has been more like, well, the kids aren't following in the faith or aren't following in the path that, I necessarily wanted as a parent. And I find that that's even more difficult to kind of process. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, that is painful to watch your kids drift away or even just walk right off, walk away immediately from the faith that you really like. One is like number one in your life, very important part of your own life, but that you've also worked so hard to transmit to them. And then you feel often that you've failed. Like, oh, I must have done something wrong. And that's a very difficult hurdle to get over, I think, to blame yourself and to put these kids in the hands of God and say, like, I did my best with this now. Now they're yours, and they always have been. So, like, do your work with them now. And yeah, it can be extremely painful and a tough thing to get through as an adult parent. And then the decisions, oh my gosh, the decisions that they make that you're just like, oh, please don't. And yet trying to remain, have a good relationship with kids who you see are making terrible choices or not living how you would like them to live, or the staying, being very far away from the faith that would help make them happy. And yet you just have to learn silence, silence, silence. Like I can support you on the things I can support you with. I can encourage you. I can love you. I can spend time with you. And I have to not continually talk about the things I disagree about. So it's such a growing time of like when God's helping you like be patient and pray for them. I mean, prayers like quadrupled in my life, or I don't know, 10 times the amount of prayers that I used to pray for the kids when they were here with me and I could control their lives. And now I have no control. So it's time to just pray and trust in God's plan for them because He's got one. But yeah, it's very painful to watch your kids make bad choices. I often think back on my parents, and even though I did remain faithful to the Catholic faith, and so did my husband, we did stupid things. We did all kinds of dumb things. And never in my life did my mom give me, I mean, say she would have sat me down and told me all the bad things I was doing, all the stupid things, I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have made any difference. So, so it's just not effective. You just gotta love them and try to keep that door open. Always keep the door open.
Yeah, you talk about making dumb decisions. And I look back on my life, we were a crisis pregnancy as teens. We left the Catholic Church, became Protestant for several years. We moved to like Pittsburgh from New Jersey as like with nothing, no job, with two kids in tow, basically just like, yeah, we just need to get a fresh start in a better place. And then join the military in the middle of a war. Like I just did all sorts of stupidity. My poor mom, I mean, for the most part, she didn't like me joining the military. And she had an earful for me, when we were teenage pregnancy. But for the most part, she just kind of went with it and just so it's not like I'm in any place to have judgment on kids when they go and do things that you don't agree with. But in your book, I mean, are those the kinds of letting go issues that your characters are having? And were you able to sort of glean some great wisdom that your characters could convey on these kinds of issues?
Well, I hope there was some wisdom in it. Yeah, Claire, decides to get married. She leaves her family and goes to Yellowstone, which, in the 50s, Yellowstone was very different than it is now. It was far more remote. That even just driving in the winter was almost impossible. So it was just a very drastic thing for her to do, leaving her, very comfortable life in Minnesota to marry this guy that nobody knew. And so a lot of that comes through in the book too. And the father is a very, I wouldn't say controlling, but, a typical 1950s father who raised three daughters on his own and he knows best for them. And he is sure that if he sends his second daughter, Bridget, out to check on her sister and convince her to come home, he doesn't really care if she comes home with or without her husband. He just wants her back. And so he's meddling in a marriage. And that is, something everybody, I think, who has married adult children has to watch for. It's like we love to say things like, oh, I didn't lose a daughter, I gained a son or whatever. But I never really liked that because, like, that is not what marriage is. You aren't entering into this other family. You're making your own family with this new, with your spouse. That's what it says in the Bible. You leave your father and mother and cling to your spouse. And I think it's really hard sometimes for parents of these adult children to realize that, like, they're making their own family and they're going to make their own choices. And we probably aren't going to agree with all of them. And then they're going to have children, which even that makes it even harder because it's like, oh my gosh, my grandchildren, like you're making choices that I don't agree with for my grandchildren. So it's just a lot of that is happening in the book. And he is the dad is a minor character, but I really love him because you could see how he adores his kids. I mean, he's just fiercely devoted to his daughters. Yeah, he wants what's best for them. And he's certain that it's not living in Yellowstone with this man he does not know. So
And then
there,
there's an earthquake, which proves the
and then,
dad right, which just
uh,
goes to show you should always listen to your father to avoid
right.
natural disasters.
And not only that, but he sends his other two daughters out to convince his first daughter to come home, and they're all in the earthquake. And I mean, in those days, we couldn't call and Mark's, no, there's no Facebook, like Mark's safe from the Hebgen Lake earthquake. Nope. Nobody knew who had died for weeks. Nobody signs in when they drive into Yellowstone or into any of the parks or the campgrounds. So whoever was there, and died they had to just figure it out. So the dad was, of course, very distraught and heads out to Yellowstone towards the end of the book. No spoilers, but he heads out on the train, not knowing whether any of his children are alive. That would be a tough one.
Yeah. In which case, then the dad realizes maybe I shouldn't have meddled so much. Now I've made it worse. All my daughters are in jeopardy.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you've got somebody listening right now and they're going through this kind of a situation, kids grown up, they're making decisions, like they're not even asking your permission, like in Fiddler on the Roof. You're not
Yeah.
even asking the papa's permission to get married now. Any advice for on the parent side for navigating this in a healthy way that will preserve the family and your own sanity?
Just from what I've learned is that it's just really important to remember that we are no longer the center of our children's lives. And that in itself is a hard thing to realize. Like as a mom or a dad, your kids always went to school, but they came home. They went into their friend's house, but they came home. You were still a center and you're not anymore. But you can be a really important part of their lives still if you continue to listen and not give advice unless it's asked for. I mean, everybody, it's easy to say, but it's very hard to do. Like button that lip and do not say the first thing that you think of, and keeping that door open, especially with on the faith aspect of it, to never be negative about the fact that they've walked away, but always be hopeful, always be positive that the Lord has a plan for them, and that will come out to them, I think. And I think they'll learn to appreciate it, that even if they're not practicing, that you've never written it off. You've always continued to keep the door open for them for conversations, for discussions about the faith, listening to what they have to say, listening to their why they might have turned away or walked away, and to be curious. Like sometimes we think we know our kids, but they grow up and change. And to be curious and ask those questions and don't assume that you know why they're doing anything. They might have reasons that never would have occurred to you. And just that curiosity and open door attitude towards them, I think, will go a long way. And then, of course, I have learned the hard way, really, that there's never enough prayer. I mean, just praying for them and offering masses, and it can do amazing things. I tell you, I can't tell you how many times I've started a novena to Mary Ann Doer of Knots. And before I've even got to the second day, like she's already done something for me for that kid that I was thinking of. And it's like, it's already happened. It's like she's just waiting to help you. So yeah, prayer is never to be underestimated. Always
Yeah, you
can.
got to be careful with that Marian Doer of
I
Knots,
know.
because
True.
she's like, okay, you asked to undo this knot. Don't blame me. I did
That's
that
right.
novena once, and the knot was undone, and that child still hasn't come home yet.
Yeah.
But I'm sure it was the right thing at the time. But it's tough. So you gotta you gotta really want it not
Oh,
undone before you're
right.
gonna ask for that. But that brings me to, I guess, my last question for you on this. You've said a few times, and it kind of ties into what I just said. Well, God has a plan, God has a plan. And I love that theme. I love to write about that theme in my novels. Like, no matter how weird everything looks and how crazy everything gets, at the end, God kind of brings his will out of all of this. But I struggle as a parent because I'm like, well, yeah, but like there's free will, and like me or my kids could do things that are not like God could maybe make something good out of it in the end, but at the end of the day, God's not going to violate our free will. And if our kids decide that they just don't want to have anything to do with our faith or with God or whatever, I mean, like that's within their human dignity to make those decisions and then to have whatever consequences come with those decisions. That's what worries me as a parent, because it would be one thing if like I knew for sure, like God was like, don't worry about it. I got this. They're all going to heaven later. Just you're fine. They're all gonna be okay. Just keep praying and you've got this. But part of me is like, but wait a minute, that can't also possibly be true if we also have true free will. I don't know. I don't know the answer to my own question, but maybe you can give me some wisdom on this one.
Yeah, I'm afraid that one haunts me also. And sometimes I feel like I know the answer, and sometimes I am, more on the side of despair and just throwing up my hands and being like, "Come on, God! Like, just it's your will that they go to heaven, and it's my will that they go to heaven. So how about we do your will?"
If it's
So
any
yeah.
consolation,
Mhm.
what the answer I've come up with is to just throw yourself on God's mercy. Because I look
Mhm.
at if I look at the crucifix and I see Jesus up there, I'm just thinking, well, basically, I'm a total wreck disaster. I ain't getting into heaven unless God has mercy. So if that's my situation, my kids are kind of in that same situation. You just got to be like, all right, Jesus, this is all on you because if it's up to me, it's all getting screwed up here. So
It
um,
is.
there's a certain level of comfort being able to throw your hands up and be like, there's nothing I can do, God. It's up to you.
It is up to you. And I think that's what he wants from us. That's what he wants from each of us, every one of us. And we can only do what we can do. We can only control ourselves and our relationship to him. And so I think as this empty nest kind of stuff gets going with us, that's really what I've been trying to do. It's like, yeah, my relationship with God should be number one in my life. And I don't have the distractions of children and daily care of children anymore. And I really think that's what he's asking for me to do is to concentrate on showing my love for him and my relationship with him and my love for Jesus. And then it's like, hey, just don't worry. He'll take care of the rest. And free will aside, that's all we can hope for.
Amen. Amen. All right. Going back to your novel, The Fault Between Us, then it sounds like this would be a great novel for any parent of adult children to read just to help identify and process. So if they want to get their hands on your novel or learn more about you and all your other writings, where would you like them to go?
I think the best place would be to go to my website, stephanielansom.com. I got all the stuff about all the books there. Sign up for my newsletter, and I do give away a lot of books, and I give away your book. I have it coming. And once I read all these books, I give them away on my newsletter. So if you like to get free books, sign up for the newsletter and keep in touch with me.
Well, listen, it has been wonderful having you back on the show again, and I really appreciate the realness you bring to conversation. So thank you for that. And I wish you all the best with the fault between us. And thank you again. And we'll keep all of our families in our prayer. But it's great having you on the show again.
Thanks, Tony. It was good to talk to you, always.
Unfortunately, that is all the time we have for the show today. We've been speaking with Stephanie Lansom about her book, The Fault Between Us, and about the issue of parents and their adult children and letting go. Again, this is Antony Barone Kolenc. If you want to learn more about any of my writing, you can go to my website, antonykolenc.com. But until next time, may God bless us as we rely on our faith to work through the messy challenges of our lives.